Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning. My name is Eva, and I am here with Awesome Careers, really a resource and tool to help you get started about your career path and building your career. So thank you all so much for joining me today. Today's topic, it's going to be about how to rock your upcoming interview. And interviewing is it's one of my favorite topics, but it's so, how should I put it, unique because oftentimes people get very intimidated about interview, especially if you interview before or it's the first time, right? The process can be very scary for many people. And I remember even when I was a student, getting my first interview, getting that offer, I didn't know what to do. It was pretty scary. And so I wanted to put this tool and resources to help you start thinking about how you're going to go into your interview, especially for future interviews, whether or not you got a job offer or not. Again, it's really about helping you kind of frame and approach it strategically, so that way you're prepared to, shine and rock it out. So if you are catching me on the live stream, again, say hello. If you're here with us, say hello. I'm happy to see who's here and how to support you. So we're going to jump right into it. So today's topic, again, is how to rock your upcoming interview, again, whether or not you have an offer. And when you get invited to go to an interview, right, you get invited, it's really about storytelling. And oftentimes people get very intimidated, but I'm telling folks, remember, it's really talking about yourself, your experiences, your knowledge. You did the hard work, and that was submitting a resume, submitting a cover letter, right? Taking the initiative to apply and tell them that you're interested. That's amazing already. You did some really great work. The times and energy going back to tailoring and customizing your resume and cover letter just for this opportunity. They heard you and they're interested. Hiring managers are interested in you, and that's why they want to speak with you. So it's always, I tell folks, positive, because that means that your content that you're putting out, right, regarding you, your LinkedIn profile, your resume cover, it's working. You have content there, you're shining about your skills, knowledge, and abilities, and they want to hear from you. So let's jump into it. So the next piece I tell folks, again, we're going to dive into a little deeper today, is talking about what to do before, during the interview, right, as you're starting out, and then, of course, what to do after you interview, right? What are the next steps? And in some of these stuff, I remember learning, I did not know. I didn't do any of them. I was like, oh, my goodness, I just failed. I didn't do any of it. But then I came to realize, oh, my goodness, like if I knew this, I would have prepped a little bit more. I would have been sharper on my answers. So we're going to talk at each step, like what should you be aiming for during this time, okay? So what do you do before? Let's just say you got the call, right? Oftentimes employers do this, hiring managers, they'll call you instead of actually in traditional way of writing it to you to confirm. And so once you essentially get the call, what you want to do is the next piece is confirm the details, right? And so this is, for example, letting them know if they called you over the phone, you might say something like, thank you so much for the invitation to interview. This is very exciting and I'm really interested in the position. I'd be happy to, start working towards this, or, preparing for this. If you can confirm with me the dates and times and location, right? If you were doing it in person, but right now a lot of it is virtually. So what will be the virtual link, right? Make sure you get that information, or they send it to you via email, so that way you have those details confirmed. It happens often, I see, where people will say, yes, I got an interview, and they have no idea where it's located, how long the interview is going to be. Is it a 30-minute interview? Is it a 15-minute interview? Is it an hour-long interview? Who are the people you're interviewing with? Is it the hiring manager? Is it the committee, right? Or is it just the recruiter? And so getting a better understanding of all of those details and confirming it, right, will prepare you better. For example, if you know it's a 15-minute interview, typically it would be with the recruiter. They're just kind of scouting your interest to kind of see, like, is this something you really want to do, right? Do you have an interest in the company, the position, right? They just want to learn a little bit more. If you have a 30-minute interview, you can get an idea, okay, you don't have a lot of time, just enough to kind of gauge their interest and probably hear from, again, more like the hiring manager, or maybe most likely the recruiter. If you have a long hour interview, right, then you're going to be speaking with a hiring manager. You're probably speaking with probably also people who might be potentially your future coworkers. And so it varies. The more details you have about your interview, the better you are prepared. And for some executive level or mid-level, senior level positions, some of your interviews could be there's even like some cases where it's like 2 hours long, half the day, 4 hours long, or even a whole day long interview, right? Where you're meeting with different stakeholders. For example, you might be meeting with the leadership team. You might be meeting with, your future coworkers, or you might be meeting with people who also work very closely with this occupation that you're interviewing. And so there's so much details that happens, and it's easy to get lost. So you want to make sure, again, you get a better idea about when those details are, what are those details, when are they happening. For example, some cases, they'll send you an agenda, an itinerary of like, your interviews, right? Who you're meeting with, at what time, what location. So you want to make sure you have it all down, because the worst thing you don't want to do is show up and then be at the wrong place, right? Or, have the wrong link. So you want to make sure you get the right location, time, and link. The next thing you want to do is also, once you get the call, once you confirm the dates and time, the location, right, or the virtual link, then the next thing I tell folks you should be doing right away is actually researching the company. I would go on the website of the company and research the company one more time. And I would be looking at their mission, right? What is it that they do? What are they all about, right? One more time, understanding what their core values are. What does this company stand for, right? And then, of course, I tell folks, try to find any highlights or news. Like I'll go on LinkedIn to the company's webpage. They post something recently about like milestones that they achieved, right, as a company. So this way I have a better understanding where is the company coming from? Why do they need this help, right? Why are they hiring? So that way I can learn a little bit more. Again, I would try to research about the company that will help me have a better conversation, because a very common interview question that typically happens in first round or even second round interviews is they'll ask you, what do you know about what we do? That's a very common question. And you need to be able to say, during my research and after I got this, the confirmation and I reviewed your company again one more time, I'm really excited to see that you guys were doing some of this work. So that way you're telling them you did your research. You want to do that. I would also, one more time, review the job description. Now, this could be a little tricky, especially if you didn't save the job description. And so I highly, again, always recommend folks to save the job description as a PDF, in a folder. So that way you identify the position, the company, and review it one more time, especially if you're applying for multiple positions within the same company. It's very easy to get lost. And so I would review that. If, let's just say, you didn't get it or you can retrieve it for whatever reason, and usually you won't be able to retrieve it once the position has been taken off of the job boards. So it's hard to kind of go back and find them. I would reach out to the recruiter, whoever contact you, and say, hi, I'm really excited about the opportunity to interview. And I was wondering if you happen to have a copy of the job description. I'd be happy to review it one more time just as part of my preparation. And so that way they can send you a copy of it. And what I would do is I would print that thing out. I would mark all over it, right? I would quickly review what are they looking for in the candidate, right? Making sure that I'm going to prepare my stories. And that's the next piece is I will review the job description, highlight keywords in terms of the skill set, knowledge, or abilities they're looking for, and make sure that my stories that I'm preparing, right, to talk about are going to be related to those skill set, knowledge, and experience that they're looking for. So for example, if a job posting, I came across one and they're looking for a teaching experience, right? Then obviously in my story, I'm going to talk about how I done, a teaching related experience, such as tutoring, maybe even, for example, maybe I served as a grader. I worked as a teaching assistant, right? I'm going to make sure I really shine in on those relevant experiences. And so that would help me, again, prepare better to have the conversation about why I'm interested in the company, why I'm, what skill set, knowledge, or abilities do I have that really tells them that I'm ready for this job. I can do it, and I was successful in the past. And here's how I done it in the past and how I can be successful with them. So I'm, I am re-showing them one more time, right? About my skill set, knowledge, and abilities, because the person who's interviewing you may or may not have even read your cover letter. They maybe have glanced over it, right? And same with the resume. They may or may not have seen your resume or cover. They may have just glanced over it. So you want to reiterate one more time about your skill set and knowledge as if they never read them. So you don't want to miss those opportunities. Okay. And again, folks, if you're joining in, feel free to say hi in chat. I'm happy to see who's tuning in. Again, what are your concerns when it comes to preparing, right, for an interview? Love to hear from you all about that. Okay. Next things is understanding that there's going to be different types of interviews, right? And the more, again, you have information about your interview, the better prepared you are. There's, for example, one-on-one. Oftentimes, this is very common. It's you and the hiring manager, or it's you and the recruiter, right? So there's no one else. It's just going to be you both. And this typically would range from like a 15-minute, 30-minute, and in some cases, an hour long. You know, that's like the range of the time frame typically. There's group interviews. So that's you and other people, other candidates in the pool, being interviewed by the hiring manager or the recruiter, right? So again, the time frame can range from as short as 15 to 30, but typically it may be 30 to an hour just because there's more people. There's also phone interview, right? Where it's, you over the phone. Again, time frame varies, so the format's different. And there's video interview, which is now often the case during the pandemic, is through Zoom, any other online platform, right, virtual platform. So again, there's those type of interviews. You're using technology a lot more. And then there's panel interview. Panel interview is a little bit more where it's you being interviewed by a group of people. So it could be like the hiring committee, the hiring managers, other people, oftentimes leadership people in higher roles. And so they might be interviewing you. For most people, and it could be a range, a variation. Some cases, some interviews might be where it's like you one-on-one first, and then you go into, a phone screening or, a group, and then you go back to a one-on-one with a hiring manager, right? It might be a variation of some form. So, but the more prepared and aware you are about the different types of interview, the better idea and preparation you are about how to approach it. So if you know that you're using video interviewing more, you probably would have to, I tell folks, now's a good time to learn about, the different types. Ask them, what platform are they going to be using? So that way, you know how to navigate the keys and the how-tos really quick, right? The dashboard, the interface a lot more. So for example, with Zoom, right, you want to make sure that you do that with the group, right? And tell folks, if you're in a group interview, and this is a little tricky, is that you maybe ask one question, but everybody has to take a turn to answer. And it could be tricky. So you want to make sure that when you're answering, you're not going to answer what so-and-so said, right? You want to probably make sure that your answer is different. So when it comes to group interview, I tell folks, you have to show that you're listening, right? Because you want to make sure you're not saying what someone else just said. You probably either disagree or agree or add to that conversation more, right? So you definitely want to listen, take your time and answer. So that way, again, everybody has a chance. You don't want to hog up all the time, right? And so you want to utilize your time to show them that you're listening, but you're also giving your colleagues there an opportunity to also answer the question. A panel interview, I think the biggest size panel I ever heard someone experience was probably, I would say, between 12 people on their panel. And this is not a very common. Most panel interviews are not going to be that many, but occasionally it does happen once in a while. And this one's a little bit more related to academia, but it's when you have people, again, high stakeholders who are involved, folks in leadership, people this position is going to be working with, and they'll be interviewing you. And so you're like this only person sitting and everybody's taking a turn to ask you a question. This scenario, again, it's not very common, but it does happen. And again, you want to treat, and it's hard to remember everybody who asks you a question. So when you're going through these type of interviews, right, again, going back, get an itinerary of who participated in your interview from the, usually the person who contacts you, ask them, who's going to be on my committee, on my interview. I just want to get an idea of who they are. And I would do some, again, background research real quick about, who are these people that's interviewing you? Or is it, the VP that's interviewing you? Is it the hiring manager? Is it the person you're going to be reporting to, your future colleagues? Again, the more information you have, the better you are prepared to talk about your experiences. And again, when you go to the day of the interview, it's not going to be so scary because, again, you kind of heard and seen a little thing, something about them, whether it's on their LinkedIn profile. So again, LinkedIn interview, not LinkedIn interviews, but different types of interviews are, it varies. But I would say that right now, the common one is probably oftentimes, again, the one-on-one and video. And what is the group ones? Those are also very common, the phone ones. The great thing about the phone one, really quick, I want to add is that, of course, they don't see you. So it's great in that sense. However, it can be challenging because you can't pick up on body language that you would do if you had an in-person one-on-one, right? Or even if a video. So it relies heavily on technology. It also relies heavily on your ability to communicate very clearly about your thoughts and ideas. And I tell folks, when you're using phone interview, the great thing you would do is you can have all the information right in front of you. Like literally, you would have job posting, your resume, your cover letter, questions for them. And they don't see that, right? But it means you have to be able to articulate very well. And you have to, listen for pauses. So that way the other person on the other side is given a chance to ask you questions. So again, all of these different formats varies, but and it takes time to get used to them. Like I said, for some people, they'll never experience a panel interview, but they may, oftentimes everybody at some point will experience either a one-on-one or group interview or phone or video right now because the video is hot. So something to consider there. All right. Now, there are different types of interview questions, right? There's open-ended or closed-ended question. There's case scenario, behavioral, assessment, academic, and even hypothetical questions. And we don't know what they're going to ask. We have no idea what they're going to ask. Most places, when you go interview with them, the company or hiring manager or the recruiter will not tell you what the questions are. Very few cases, sometimes if they want to, they might reveal to you, hey, you have an interview coming up with us, and these are the questions we're gonna ask you. Some cases, some organizations might even offer to give you the questions ahead of time, like maybe 30 minutes or an hour before your interview. But again, most likely they will not. Most organizations will not tell you what they're going to ask you. However, the questions that they do ask you are often related back to that job description, right? It's going to talk and ask about those skills, abilities, and knowledge. And so you want to make sure you're familiar with, again, the job description. So open-ended questions will be something like, for example, which is 99.9% of the time they'll ask you, tell us about yourself, right? And that's an open-ended question. There's no right or wrong answer. It's really more of a softball that they're throwing at you to kind of engage with you, to kind of, warm you up a little bit, right? They just want to learn a little bit more about you. Closed-ended questions will be questions that are like yes and no type. Like, do you possess a driver's license? I mean, let's just say, for example, you need a driver's license in order to drive a vehicle, and that's required for the job. So again, they're just confirming, again, information about you, like do you possess or do you have the skill set or knowledge? You won't see this asked very often, but occasionally it might be asked like in the a pre-question survey or something like that. For example, like, are you the age of 21 in order to sell alcohol or something like that, right? If you're working with in a position where you're going to be working with alcohol. So again, it varies, but you won't see that often being asked. But it does occasionally, like once in a while, they'll ask. Case scenario questions, they might give you a case, a situation, right, where, something's happening and they really are trying to assess what's your behavior, right? How would you approach the situation? And your goal is to, again, walk them kind of through your steps. How would you do it? Similar to behavioral questions, right? Behavior is a little different in the sense where like they're asking you, and then oftentimes you'll know it's a behavioral question because it starts off something like this, like tell us about a time when, right? Or describe a situation when. So It varies, but oftentimes describe or tell us about a time. Those are like 2 beginning sentences that flags and said, this is a behavioral question. What they are doing is they're assessing to see what was your behavior like when you encounter similar situations like this. How did you go about it, right? And of course, what were the results? They're trying to figure out, were you successful in the past, and can you demonstrate that you can be successful with us, right? Is that the potential there? Is there potential there for you? So oftentimes interviews, there's a lot of behavioral questions. And again, they're trying to assess your behavior. And then we'll come back a little bit more about an example of how to go about like addressing or using the STAR method to answer the behavioral question. There's also like the assessment question. Assessment questions more something like, it's not a question, but it's more like an assessment you have to take for competency knowledge, right? They might just give you like, oh, like they might just, in some cases, give you, for the in-person one, and when it used to be, they can give you a marker and say, here's the problem, solve it. And you have to walk them through or solve the equation or something like that. And again, it's a little bit more competency that what they're assessing for, right? So you don't see a lot of that happening, but every now and then for folks who, for example, maybe in the tech, mathematics a little bit more, they might be involved in something like that. There's also the academic question. So academic relates a little bit more for folks who are pursuing additional education and experiences and knowledge there. So they might ask questions regarding that. Like, for example, what's your approach in working with a certain like qualitative or assessments, things like that, or what's your interest in, researching more about this area. So they're just more of an academia related. And there's also the hypothetical question. Again, it's not very common, but you'll still hear once in a while a hypothetical question like, if this happened, right, and you had to do this, what would you do? Again, they're still assessing for your behavior, but it's like a hypothetical question. It's not like a real, situation or a scenario. It's just hypothetical. Like, for example, if you, won the lotto, right? What would you do with your money, right? What types of world problems would you save, right? It could be something like that, but that's not like a really good question. But it's, again, hypothetical. So oftentimes in the types of interview questions, we'll see is that a lot of people are being asked open-ended questions, like I mentioned, the front and the beginning, and a lot of behavioral questions, and even some case scenario questions for folks in different industry. Again, they're trying to assess like, how would you go about it, right? The steps you'll walk them through. And what you want to keep in mind is that when you are answering your questions, most answers should be about the 2 to 3 minute mark. It shouldn't take you 5 minutes to answer one question, because if you are at this point, I tell folks you're too nervous and you're rambling, right? So you want to slow down again and take breaths, listen to the question and answer, and seeing what type of question are they asking. And as you hear the question, you'll approach the question better. So you want to, again, get familiar with the different types of questions that may be asked for your industry, for your area. Okay. Attire. What should you be wearing, right? So I tell folks, ideally you should be in neutral colors. So I would avoid like neon green, obviously, that's very strong. I would go with something like, even for men and women, stick with the dark colors, or again, neutral colors. You should still there's nothing wrong with overdressing. It's better to overdress than underdress. So if I'm going for an interview, right, and I had to prepare like my Zoom interview and things like that, I would still dress up professionally, because I don't know at any point in time, what if I have to get the water and I have to lean over, or I have to stand up, right? And if they see that I'm in my PJs, it's not really convincing to them that I am the professional that they should be hiring. So I would always want to make sure that, again, even if I'm doing Zoom interview, right, and it's waist up, I would still be wearing pair of pants that, again, slacks or dress pants that are more appropriate than it is my PJs. So you definitely, again, better to prepare than under prepare. And I tell folks you should be doing ideally like the night or at least an hour before, so that way you're comfortable in the attire, you look comfortable, you look approachable, you look like you're ready to answer questions. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting or standing, or when you go to interview, you're going to look, if you haven't tried out your clothing yet, you're not going to be very comfortable, and you're going to look itchy, you're going to look exhausted, you're going to look really agitated. And that's not a very pleasant experience in the interview. So you want to make sure that you check out and pick out your clothes like the night before, right? I tell folks, if you have to iron, go iron that thing, right? If you have to, do the, when in person a lot happens, go back to buying the lint roller, bring the lint roller and, get all those lints out of the way. Because there's a thing where when we are in a different clothing set, where we're professional, where we're representing as the professional us, we feel good. And when we feel good about how we look, we're more prepared, we're more confident, we're excited about the job interview. We're excited to meet people, and we're excited to tell our story. So I tell folks, you want to look good, you want to feel good, and you want to go rock your interview. Otherwise, if you look agitated, it makes the interviewers agitated as well, right? So you don't want to rub that kind of vibe. You want to make sure you rub good vibe. Okay. Now, during the interview, right, we're going to talk, okay, you got this, you get all the prep work done, right? You're like, okay, it's day of, right? What are we going to do? And so what you want to do at the beginning of the interview, right, always arrive early. And what I mean by that is it's better to, if you can't be on time, be early. It's better to be early than it is to be late. If you are late, it tells them you can't make this meeting. We're not worth your time. Imagine if we had to hire you and you couldn't even make the meeting. So you want to make sure you arrive early. So if it was in person, right, I tell folks like 30 minutes before the interview, I would be in the parking lot already. I would be sitting in the parking lot, got everything ready to go, heading out to the building, right? 15 minutes before before the interview, I would quickly just, go use the restroom, brush up, right? Just to make sure everything's good, ready to go, wash my hands, right? Take my mint, whatever the case may be. And usually 10 minutes before the interview, or even 5 to 10 minutes before the interview, I would check in to the front desk reception and let them know, hi, I'm here for my interview. So that way they know I'm ready. I'm here, ready to go. And when I sit down and wait, if it was in person again, right, I will be reviewing one more time the job description, my resume, the cover letter that I submitted, the questions I have for them. So that way I'm preparing myself. This is the time when I will mute my phone, right? I will make sure that it's silent. Everything's good to go. I'm not trying to rush to the restroom anymore, right? I'm ready to go. So this is also the time when I tell folks you need to be aware that, you're also being assessed, not just from the people who you're meeting with, but this is the time where you're also being assessed by the front desk reception, maybe the security guard. Right. So you got to make sure you're friendly to everyone you meet that, represents the company, because you never know who's going to be at your on your committee, or who the committee is going to ask for and say, hey, when someone checked in, how were they in the waiting room? Right. Were they distracted? Were they stressed, or do they feel pretty good? Were they greeting everybody? Were they well? Right. Because they're kind of trying to assess right there in some ways your character trait. Right? How are you? How do you blend and match the vibe you're giving off? So you want to make sure you're super friendly, right? I would greet everyone. I would greet the security. I would say good morning or good afternoon. I would say hello to the reception, right? Smile to the people who are walking past you, because you don't know if that person is going to end up being on your hiring committee. So you want to make sure you demonstrate to them that you are their future coworker. You want to show them you got the glow. The glow is I'm ready to work, right? And of course, I tell folks, be confident when and shake the hiring manager or the people that you're connecting with their hands, and shake it firmly. That there's a good business gesture, and that's really typically again 2 shakes for business, right? Hi, welcome, or if you're coming in, you might say, thanks for having me, really appreciate it. I know you guys must be very busy, and it's just been really wonderful. This is very exciting. Keep it simple. Introduce yourself in case, again, people may not recognize that you are the person coming in, and might say something like, hi, I'm here, I have an interview. So that way, again, people know who you are, or just greeting them. So that way again, you're showing you are the future coworker potential. Okay. Now, the first question that's very common and that they'll ask is, tell us about yourself, right? Or tell me about yourself, right? Whatever the case, a variation of that. And there's multiple ways in how you can answer this. But I think my favorite, if you're starting off or you're gonna do a revamp about, again, the interviewing, I tell folks the most easiest way is the present, past, and future. This is like my favorite method for this question, because this is an open-ended question, right? And remember, they don't want to hear about like your lifelong story. They don't got the time for that. They just want to get a quick softball rolling about learning more about who you are. So I tell folks, remember, when you are answering this question, past, present, and future, that tell me about yourself, right? You're using this method. And you're quickly going to identify, who are you right now? What's happening in your life in terms of your professional life, right? So currently, what are you doing? What skills and experience are you you've been developing? What have you been involved in, right? And then I will quickly jump to the past and say, in the past, I either I worked at a different location, or I took on, I was doing a lot of work that revolved this ability, and that helped me learn about this area. And then I would jump to the future and let them know about, in the future, I'm looking forward to growing my skill set in this, which is why I'm very interested in this position. Tying it back to them. So that way they know that, and you're trying to tell them in your future, you see, right, developing your skill set and experience with them. So again, present, past, and future. That's going to be a great way to break the ice and let them know that that's why you want to be here. That's why you're interested in the position. So again, it should be taking you no more than 2 to 3 minutes to answer each question. And I tell folks, again, if you're taking too long or too nervous, pause, think about the question really quick, and then answer. Okay. And again, if you're catching us on the replay, or if you're here with us live, let me know in chat, what's one of the questions that you get that you stumble, like you have a challenge with, or you're like, I don't know how to answer this question. They just asked me and I have no idea what they were looking for. I'm curious, what are you being asked out there? Okay. Beginning of the interview, right? You want to limit your answers to, again, no more than 2 to 3 minutes, like I mentioned earlier, but only include the, again, relevant details. You don't want to go about, hey, when you were a kid and you had a bicycle, or hey, this other thing, like maybe in your spare time you do fishing, whatever the case may be. They're not really interested in that for the most part at the beginning of the interview. They really are just really aiming for, again, what's the skill set, knowledge, and abilities that you have that are relevant for this position. Make sure you have good eye contact. And I know this is tricky, even I still struggle with this, but you want to make sure you have good eye contact when you're meeting them in person, right? You don't want to stare so sternly, right? Because it's very aggressive. Good blinking, right? But I would kind of, if I have a committee of people who are interviewing me, I will look a little bit side to side to kind of engage with everyone as I'm answering my question, right? So that way they know that I'm paying attention to them. Sometimes, often, what's happening is that the people on the committee, or even the hiring manager, they're asking questions, but they're writing down notes. So they're not looking at you. They're looking down. And so I want to make sure that when I'm taking my time to answer, that sometimes they'll look up. And when they do look up, try to lock in right there, lock in eyes. So that way they know that, hey, I'm talking to you, right? And you'll see that they're nodding. If they're nodding, right, that means they're hearing you. You want to make sure that, you get a chance to sort of lock eyes, even for like the most briefest moment. If right now with Zoom or with online video interviewing I tell folks, you have to learn how to talk to the camera. This is a camera. And for most of us, we're not familiar or used to talking to the camera in an interview. We're often, we like to see faces, and there's no face, right? And when you're looking at the camera, it's just you. If at most, maybe you'll see a reflection, right? So what I tell folks as a little trick you can do is, even in front of your webcam, you can put, like, for example, that might help. I have a little sticky notes right here, for example. And what I do is I will put it up there right in front of the camera or the lens. So that way it helps me kind of control and lock those eyes in there, right? So that's another little trick I recommend. Or some people put, like, for example, cut out a little picture, put it right there so you know where to look in the lens. You want to make sure that you are talking to them virtually as if they were right in front of you. You want to make sure that they're right there. So that way it tells them that you're listening, you're engaged. Otherwise, this is what's happening. You're talking and it looks like, I have another screen right here. And if you're talking this way and they're looking at you, it looks like you're disengaged and you're not interested in interviewing with them. You're not interested in really working for them or the company. So you want to make sure that you're talking to them as if they're right in front of you, even though it's virtual. Okay. The next piece I tell folks, and don't forget to smile. You should smile. You don't want to smile like really hard like this either, right? You should smile as if you want to be there. So again, a smile means you want to be there. You want to learn from them too. You want to hear from them. Interviewing is not about you being assessed the whole time. Remember, you're also assessing them. You're trying to figure out, are they a good company to work for, right? And so smiling is a way to say, hey, I want to be here and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with me. I really appreciate that. Remember, these are busy people. They're trying to fill a position while they got a bunch of other tasks to do. So even if it's 30 minutes, an hour long, that means they're going to be sitting there hearing about you, your experiences, right? So you want to make sure you also smile and let them know that you want to be there. Really quick, Jeannie came by. Hello from Sacramento. Hello, Jeannie. Welcome. Thank you so much. She's saying, great resource, much needed. Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so next thing, now we start rolling into the big piece, right? And again, interviewing is just about storytelling. If you think of it that way, it's not about being like super assessed, like, you don't get a grade. It's really about storytelling. It's telling about you, the superstar, about the great things you've done. Remember, you've done a lot of amazing things. You've done hard work. You demonstrated hard work. And you're going to go into the interview and tell them about the amazing things you've done, your skill set, your knowledge, your ability, how you tackle a situation, what was the result because of your efforts, right? And so storytelling is where you are telling the story about you, the superstar. And they're there to listen. They're there to engage and hear about what you've done. Remember, they kind of maybe saw your resume and cover letter. Again, we don't know if they really read it, but we're going to tell it as if they never seen your resume, as if they never seen your cover letter. And I think when you approach it this way about storytelling, it's a little easier, right? It doesn't feel as intimidating. And of course, so the behavioral question I mentioned earlier, right? That tell me about a time or describe a situation in, literally that's a red flag saying this is a behavioral question. And what you should be doing in approaching it is this way. There's a lot of different ways, like the PAR method, again, the STAR method, but I like to use the STAR method. It's very easy, keeps it simple. Describe the situation, right? The actions you took, and then the results because of your efforts. It's very similar to, again, how we would approach the resume. But what's good about this approach is that it tells the reader really quick, not the reader, the listener, the committee, the hiring managers, that you have an understanding of the question. So the question could be something simple as, tell us about a time when you have to demonstrate leadership and problem solving. So they are asking in that scenario a situation in which you demonstrate a little bit of both, right? So remember, before you answer, and I've seen this many times where people just jump into the answer before the question's even done, or right at the moment the question's done. You don't want to do that because it shows them that you're jumping too soon. So you're allowed, remember, I typically say between 15 to 20 seconds after they finish stating the question for you to gather your thoughts, pull into your memory bank of all the possible scenarios and all my experience. Where have I demonstrated leadership and problem solving? Oh, it was when I volunteered, or it was when I did this internship, or in my last position, or maybe in my current role, right? And then I'll quickly describe to them. I tell folks you should be at the 30 seconds to describe the situation. I was in whatever role where this was the presenting problem, whatever that situation was. It should take you no more than 30 seconds to describe. And then I would take the remaining 1 minute. It should take you about a minute to describe the actions you took. And when you're talking about the actions, what you're doing is you're weaving in about your skill set, knowledge, and abilities. Remember, that's what they assess for. They're trying to figure out, do you have the skill set, knowledge, and abilities, right, in your behavior of how you demonstrated that in the past. And so I would weave that in. Then I would spend the remaining 30 seconds talking about the results, the positive outcomes. Because of my ability to do this, we were able to achieve, or my organization was able to achieve whatever it is. Situation, action, and results. When they hear that, that means that they can understand, wow, you were successful in your past. You just demonstrate to us really quick, a quick situation, how you went about it, and because of your efforts, what did it lead to? So you want to make sure every time you answer any question, for the most part, after the tell me about yourself, right, you give them an example of your experience, an example of your skill set, abilities, and knowledge. And you give them outcomes, positive outcomes. That's more promising, and it tells them that you were successful. What happens is that, and similarly, a lot of people will go into the interview, but they'll do this piece. They'll just describe the situation, the action, but we have no idea what the results were. We have no idea if you were successful. And so you want to weave that in to let them know, like, this is how I kind of went about it. This is how, because of my efforts, my leadership, my abilities, we were able to achieve this. Quickly, Mai says, hi, friend MN. Hi, Mai, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. So this is like, I tell folks, like the golden nugget when it comes to interviewing is telling them your story. Is if you're, every time you are asked a question, you give them an example. If you just go in and they ask you a question and like you give an opinion or your thoughts, right? But you didn't give them an example of how you demonstrated that ability or knowledge, it's not convincing. It doesn't tell them that you have what it takes to be successful. It tells them you have, an opinion and a thought and an idea, but you haven't demonstrated to them that you were successful. So you want to make sure that you do that. And that's really important. Once you kind of go through a different range, again, it could be from, you can be asked 8 questions to 10, 12, 15, 16 questions of those. It can vary. But now at the end, and what typically happens at the end is they'll ask you your experience, right? They'll ask you, after they're done asking your, let me go back. After they're done asking your experience, then they'll ask you, what is it? Do you have any questions for us? And that's when you get to ask them questions. Remember, you're also trying to figure out, again, are they a good company to work for, right? What's it going to take to be successful? So what you want to do is keep an eye on the time, and it's hard. So when it's this time when they ask you, do you have any questions for us? I would quickly, again, if I had a watch, I would pull up my watch and kind of get an idea what the remaining time is. If I have 5 minutes left, that gives me an idea. I'm probably going to have a chance to ask probably, maybe at most 2 to 3 questions only. If I see that, there's 10 minutes left, right, before our interview ends, then I might have a little chance to ask you a little bit more questions. Because remember, it takes you about between 30 seconds, maybe 20 seconds to ask the question, and about them another minute or 2 to answer as well. So you don't want to ask a bunch of questions, but what you should do is prepare a bunch of questions, but only actually ask, depending on how much time is remaining, the ones that are the most important to you, that you need to know in order to learn more about the position. And don't forget to listen throughout the interview. They may be already also, or usually at the beginning of the interview, they may be sharing information with you about the position that's already answering some of your questions. So that's okay as well. Now, when you ask them questions, like what type of questions should you ask? And this varies, but typically you should always ask, questions about the position. So like you might mention, earlier you asked, something about my ability to do this. Can you tell me more? Does this position take on a lot of leadership opportunities to make a lot of decisions? You might ask about the company culture. You might want to ask about, responsibilities of the position, examples of the projects, right? What's a typical day life for this position? Is this a new position? Is this maybe even in some case, why is this position open? What does this position oversee and do? That's, again, questions that you are not getting from the job description and from your research about the company. You need to learn more. You should always ask them questions that relate to the position in the company, because that tells them that you really want this position. And they want to hire people who want the position. So you want to make sure that you're conveying that you did your research, but you're also showing them that you're interested and you want to learn more. I would not ask questions that I could, again, obtain from the website or the job description. I would say, hey, after reviewing this, I was still wondering about this. Can you elaborate? Can you give me an example? Right? That will help you. And again, I tell folks, do not ask about salary or benefits. We're not there yet. I wouldn't ask about that. I would wait until they present that and then say something a little bit later on, you're happy to revisit that once an offer has been made. That keeps you, in the window there. But you should have a better idea also early in your research, when you're researching the company and the position, about what the salary range would be. And again, you can easily search that on salary.com, and stay tuned the next couple of days. I'm going to do another workshop about how to research, your salary and how to negotiate. But in the interview process at this time, we wouldn't bring up the salary. We wouldn't have an idea of it, but we wouldn't bring that up. And even and it's also common too, not like frequently, but it does occasionally happen. They will ask, what's your salary expectation for this position at the first round or even second round interview? If they do ask, you can give a range based on the market fair salary. You can say, based on my research, it's presented as this, but I'm open to learning. As I learn more, I'm open to having a discussion. Because you don't want to, say that I'm willing to take with 45K, when really, as you learn more about the position and you're realizing, hey, this position is really more than 45, it's 50 instead. So you want to really provide opportunities of a range. So that way, again, you're also being realistic about it, and you're not going to pigeon yourself into like a lower salary. During this time, you should always ask again about, like, for example, how do they measure success here? You might want to ask them, if you're talking to someone who's in a hiring, like the hiring manager or the person you're reporting to, you might ask them, what are some challenges this position faces or the organization faces? So that way you have a better understanding of like what you're going to do if you were to come into this role. What are some challenges you would face and how would you go about it? And the last question that you can ask, that you should always ask, is how soon when will you hear regarding this position? You want to get an idea of the timeline. Are they still in first round, second round? They're close to making decision. Are they doing references already, right? How soon should we expect to hear back from them regarding this position? Excuse me. So that way they understand that, we're still interested and that we're keeping an eye out for a notification from them. And this gives you a better idea, like, hey, they're still in the first round. That means I'm also going to continue to interview other places. You keep interviewing, but you wouldn't say that you would be interviewing, but internally you would still be interviewing for other positions until an offer has been made and until you actually sign yes to a company in a position. But this gives you an idea of the timeline. And the reason why is because, for example, if like you're in the first round and the second round interview is coming up, but the person who's conducting the second round is on vacation, they might not be back until a month later or 2-3 weeks later. And so again, it gives you an idea of the timeline. Okay, now we're winding down. We finish the interview. We say, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You shake everyone's hands again, right? And you walk out of the office. You're heading to the reception. And this is what I do right after I'm done with the interview, right? I would head down, especially if I don't have the contact of all the people who interview me or the person. I would go to the reception and say, I just had a really wonderful interview with so-and-so. Do you happen to have their email contact? I am going to prepare my last minute notes, and I want to make sure I get their contact and try to get the business cards of the people who participated in your interview. Or I would share my contact with the reception, so that way the reception can send it to me via email if the reception doesn't have it right away. Once I go home, right? And this is a time where, oftentimes you're walking back to the car, or maybe you just finished the Zoom, interview, and you're like, darn, like I totally forgot to mention about my ability to do this, or, oh, I feel like I bombed it, right? It happens. It's okay. It's normal. We all experience that. But that will happen where you're like, oh, I wish I would have mentioned this, or I wish I would have approached that answer this way. And again, it's normal. It happens. But what you can do, and it's good that you still remembered. I would quickly jot down my notes really quick. Oh, when they asked me regarding my ability to do this, I answered this, but what I really meant was this. I would write it down really quick, jot those notes down, and within 24 hours, I would not do it like right away. I would kind of give it like at least 12 to 24 hours. I would write my letter to them. And again, it's my last letter. This is like your last communication to them before they make a decision. And I would pitch to them one more time, right? In my thank you note, I would write a letter, a simple email, right? You can do old-fashioned letter too, but it takes a while. So everything gets made very fast now. So I would say just go with the email. And I will address all the people in the committee and say, thank you so much for interviewing me on certain amount of date and time for this position. Remember, you don't know if they've been on multiple committees. You don't know if they're overseeing multiple positions. So they're going to forget about you. You're going to remind them one more time, right? Thank you so much for taking the time to interview me for this position on this date and time. After hearing from everyone about their experience in the position regarding the company and learning more about the position, I'm very interested in the position, and it's really exciting. One of the things, and again, this is where I will highlight and do my bounce back, right? Or bounce back from the interview is I will highlight again my skills, abilities, and knowledge. You know, after learning more, I'm very excited and feel that my skill set in this and my knowledge in this, along with my abilities to do this, will be great added value that I can contribute significantly to the position in the company. One of you asked, or I might say if I remember who asked, said or asked the question regarding this, and what I meant to mention was that this is how I would approach it. So this is in case if you like bombed a question, you're like, oh, I just did awful on that question. That's not really what I meant. And then I would use the letter to quickly, do a recovery there and show them that, after careful thinking, this is really what I meant. And then I would wrap up and say, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview. I look forward to the next steps. So that's really simple. A thank you of their time and quickly reiterating more and more time about your skill set, knowledge, and abilities. That's what they decide on who's going to go to the next, interview or who they're going to make the offer to, right? Who's going to be a better fit for the position in the company. So that's pretty much your last pitch before they make a decision. And this is the piece, the thank you note, that many, many people don't do. And when you do it, trust me, you stand out. That means that they have to sit there and think about who's this person and what position should they interview for, right? You're refreshing them in their mind out of their busy day one more time about how fantastic you are. And it forces them in some ways, right, to go back to your resume and cover letter to review it one more time before they make a decision. And trust me, people who write thank you letters really do stand out. Not a lot of people do it, and I highly encourage you to do it. So again, another really cool tip there. We're right at the end of it. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about interviewing? If there's how many interviews you go to, right? Really, I tell folks, when it comes to the more interviews you go to, the better you are at interviewing, because you get better and better at telling your story. And so when you get better at telling your story, it sounds more natural, right? And you know what to say about you. So if you don't know what to say about you, now's a good time to go practice. I tell folks, you can even do it. Record yourself. There's a lot of tools. Record yourself. I would Google up top 10 interview questions and try to answer them and time yourself. Okay, how long is it taking me to interview? Is it taking me 5 minutes to answer this question, right? Is it taking me 3 minutes? And again, I would aim for that 2 to 3 minute mark. I'm guilty of this too, but in interviews, I do a lot of ums. You see that? So I would try to reduce it. That means I need to slow down, right? I need to quickly gather my thoughts, answer the question, so that way I'm reducing those ums. And it happens, it's part of our innate language in some way. So we don't think of it consciously. Another thing you might want to do also, and I tell folks, is actually practice in front of the mirror. So that way you have an idea of your facial gestures, right? See, I just did again. When you do this, you can kind of see like, oh, what kind of face am I making? Am I making like a silly face when I say something? Or do I look very stern and serious? Do I need to soften it up a little bit? So that way, again, you have an idea of what your facial features are sort of like. And I tell folks, when you're doing that STAR method, situation, action, results, and you ended up with something positive, you should be smiling, right? If you said, oh, we did this and you look sad, and it doesn't really convey the same thing. So you want to make sure you get a chance to also check in your facial gestures. Hi, is it Nigo from Stockton? Hi, welcome. Melissa's like, hello from Emmon from Minnesota. Great tips on writing the thank you note after the interview. Absolutely. I do that too. A lot of exactly. And it's okay, like I said, but the more we practice, the more we can reduce it. So that way it's not so obvious. And really, see, I did it again. It takes time. So don't expect to be like the pro speaker overnight, right? The more interviews you go to, the better you are at telling your story, and it becomes more natural and easier, and you will know what to say. You'll know, again, sort of like your internal time. Okay, it's going to take me 2 minutes. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to focus on this for 2 minutes. So I recommend, again, timing yourself, recording yourself, play it back. I would even do with like a friend, I would say, hey, do you have like 20 minutes of your time to kind of do a practice round with me? And we would just do it like online like this. I will say, here are the questions, and I want you to time me for 2 minutes for each question, or 2 to 3 minutes, and see, did I answer the question? So that way they're hearing it out and they can give you feedback and let you know, oh, this is what's working. This is what needs to, you were saying something, but you kept looking away. So that means you need to, again, come back in here and make eye contact, right? I'm guilty of it too. As you can see, there are some people out there who are hand gestures. So when you talk and you're constantly like this, I tell folks, you need to minimize that. So you need to learn to put your hands, for example, even on your laps, right? And learn talking like this. Or if you're on a desk, right? So like in an interview, oftentimes if you're going to a place that you might not be on a desk, you might just be a chair sitting there, and you might be like doing, so I would put my hand, something like this, just kind of down. So that way I'm controlling for, again, hand gesture. I would only utilize hand gestures to emphasize something. Like we went to, we put a fundraising together, and it was 2,000 people. Notice I'm trying to emphasize it, or I'm trying to minimize something. I don't want to do this the whole time, because if I'm talking and I'm doing this the whole time, it is very distracting. And I tell folks, it looks like you're trying to wash windows, right? You're playing Mr. Mime. So you want to minimize it. And it happens. Like I said, I'm guilty of it too, but we want to minimize it because we don't want to distract the audience. We don't want them to focus on this that's happening all over the place. We want them to focus on this, which is us, our face, and what the words that we are saying. That's what we want them to focus on. And that's why it's important to, like, again, attire. I don't want to go too flashy. I don't want like giant earrings. I want to minimize that, right? I want to really make sure that, again, they focus. If anything, it's just on my eyes and my mouth. So that way we're making good eye contact and they can hear the words that I'm saying. So I highly recommend this approach, and kind of, thinking about what you wanted to say, what are you going to talk to them about, right? Your skills, abilities, and knowledge, using the STAR method as a strategy to really answer behavioral questions, and using the, present, past, and future to answer the, tell me about yourself. And of course, doing the thank you notes, as I mentioned, and just by shuffling a few of these things and integrating it into your interview, it's going to prepare you a whole lot more than trying to, like I tell folks, go into the interview and have no idea, right? The more prepared you are, the better you are at interviewing. And remember, being nervous for an interview is a good type of stress. These are the stress that says, if you're nervous, that means your body is telling you, hey, you want to do well. You really want to do well. You want this job. So that's a good type of stress. Otherwise, I tell folks, if you go into the interview and you're not like stressed about it, you're not concerned, that means you really didn't prepare, right? So you want to make sure that you prepare. It's very normal. It's a good type of stress. And in some cases, I tell folks, like the night before or the morning of, do power poses, right? Do the Wonder Woman pose. And that can help you just, again, increase your confidence, right? Your posture. When you're sitting down, again, good posture means you're projecting good volume, good eye contact. And that means you're present, you're engaged, and you want to be there with them. So just a few small tips there to help engage and help you have and rock your interview. So that's pretty much all it is today, folks. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in chat. But I really appreciate your time and energy, and I hope that was helpful. And again, if you haven't subscribed, follow, trying to grow my YouTube and Instagram. So if you're hanging out, come hang out with me there. I'll be posting a little bit more as well. Until then, have a good one. Have a nice, what is it? Today's Thursday already. Oh my goodness. So early Merry Christmas and happy holidays for you folks, and have a good one. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next upcoming workshop. Have a good one, everyone.